Welcome to the China EVs and More podcast. In the next hour or so, my co-host Lei Xing and I will go over the week's most important and interesting news coming out of the global EV, AV, and mobility sectors, and maybe talk about a social media spat between two important people. What Lei and I discussed today is not investment advice, so please don't use it as investment advice. To our loyal listeners and viewers, welcome back. And to our new listeners and viewers, welcome. We ask that you smash those subscribe and like buttons so you don't miss anything from us in the future. Lei and I are two of the most knowledgeable people in the world doing this, so help us get the word out to others about this show. My name is Tu Lee. I am the managing director at Sino Auto Insights, a global management consultancy that hopes organizations bring innovative and tech-focused products and services to the transportation and mobility sectors. I write a free weekly newsletter that we pull many of our discussion topics from. You can sign up for it at sinoautoinsights.substack.com, which, of course, I encourage you all to do. A normal week, can you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, it slowed down, Lei. Good morning to Mr. Laoban. This is your co-host, Lei Xing, former chief editor of China Auto Review. And this is episode number 211. Actually, first of all, happy centennial to the Chrysler brand.
Oh, right.
Today, June 6th is the actual birthday for Chrysler. And your hometown brand. The trivia, I don't know if you knew this or not. The Chrysler Dodge Neon at one point in the 90s was considered to be localized production in China. But that never happened. What ended up happening was Buick started producing the Sail.
Oh.
And that became a overnight success. So just a bit of history. But Chrysler, they've gone through the
neon. That's bringing back some memories. That's like my friends in high school had them, I think. So
yep. And so that's out of the way. The BBB. I think people who follow what's been happening the last couple of days know what BBB means.
So let me add a little bit to that whole Chrysler thing. I grew up in Pontiac, Michigan, originally where the Detroit Lions played. There's a stadium called the Pontiac Silverdome. When they built the headquarters in Auburn Hills, it was just a couple of miles from my house. So my brother currently works at Stellantis, and so I drive by the Stellantis headquarters quite often. And I think Volkswagen Group or Audi headquarters is right around the corner. So for those that are wondering how immersed I am in local American, Michigan automotive sector, I was just at Forvia headquarters yesterday for a conference. So I'm surrounded in Metro Detroit by companies that I've been familiar with since I was a little kid. So what's happening right now, what Lei and I have been discussing for the last several years, he also has been covering the China side of what U.S. automakers and European automakers are doing in China. Now it's actually come full circle because all the companies that he has covered with his father via their China Auto Review platform has evolved into the current set of companies, the 50, 100, 150 or so companies that many of which we talk about. I guess I wanted to say all that, Lei, because the 100-year anniversary, I'd like to say I was following them for about 40 of those years, or like 45 of those years. And the different iterations, remember, it was just Chrysler, Daimler Chrysler, FCA, and then Stellantis. So yeah, and then I heard that the Orion assembly plant, where I got my first job at GM, that might actually end up closing because of all the changes to the EV strategy for General Motors. But I digress. Sorry for taking up a few minutes to be nostalgic, but I think it was important for people to understand that I'm homegrown Michigan kid that just happened to live in a few interesting places. But yeah, so.
No, but I mean, Chrysler is an important part of the Chinese auto industry history because of AMC's original joint venture with BAIC in Beijing Jeep, which later became Beijing Daimler Chrysler, which later became Beijing Benz, BBAC today. It was the first Chrysler Corporation was the first company, foreign automaker, to set up a joint venture in China. So that's kind of the significance. And then all the hiccups that they had over the years. But back to today, we're kind of in a messy situation here in the U.S. with Elon.
It gets messier by the day, literally, because tariffs, changes in strategy, more tariffs, restrictions on rare earths, and then Elon and Trump have a falling out over social media platforms.
Yeah, it was interesting. It happened on the same day that Trump had the talk with Xi, and it looked like that talk was quite positive based on the readouts, based on what Trump posted. So it feels like we're going, perhaps, maybe not, but Trump and Xi could be another bromance brewing. Who knows? Now that the Trump and Musk, they're breaking up, and that was
one thing's for sure with the big beautiful bill and the tariffs threatening to push the United States into a recession. I think Americans are feeling pretty uneasy, you and I included, about our economy. And for me in Michigan, I went to 2 conferences this week, and what did everyone want?
While we're here, just talk about we'll get out of the way, and then
so 2 days ago, there's every year there's an auto tech conference, and it's from Informa. So they have global conferences, and this one happens to be where the battery show used to be in Novi.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And these conferences, they are really, really trying to find their firm ground, because how people consume information, and I think people are getting more bored with the whole one-way communication with a bunch of panels and everybody agreeing with each other. So you and I, we don't do it on purpose, but because we're not tethered to a specific OEM or a specific supplier, I think you and I are free to kind of talk pretty openly and frankly about where we believe the challenges are, the opportunities are, the companies, the stumbles of the companies, and then the opportunities. Sure. So 2 days ago was a small, they called it a fishbowl, where Joe White and I sat there and threw out a few topics to begin with. And then Joe White, for those that don't know, is a Pulitzer Prize winning journalist. He was the Detroit bureau chief for the Wall Street Journal. You know him, Lei. He just retired from Reuters and is writing a great newsletter on Substack called The High Speed Rodeo. So for those that don't know who Joe is, he also wrote a book about Japan and when they came into the United States, which is very, very apropos for what's happening now with China. And so he and I just answered a bunch of questions. There's about 12, 15 people sitting around these couches, and it was super interactive because they were asking us questions. We were asking them questions. And then yesterday was a panel discussion among the automotive analysts, and a supplier group president sat on the panel, a contract manufacturer, tier 1 supplier sat on the panel, and then I sat on the panel, a lawyer. So a few advocacy group guys. Terry Wojciechowski, the president of CareSoft, he was also on the panel. And we talked about manufacturing and what's it gonna take to make the United States competitive again. Everybody was kind of framing it as U.S. When I grabbed the mic and made my initial comment, I said, with the current trajectory of all of the tariffs and everything, we need to look at Canada and Mexico as competitors potentially. And then we need to look at Michigan versus the United States South as competitors. We can't say the United States because with the tariffs, and you and I saw these Canadian dealership groups at Shanghai Auto, seeing which Chinese brands they might help sell in Canada. So the USMCA or the trade agreement, free trade agreement, that's getting blown up. If it doesn't get renegotiated, Canada and Mexico are going to become our competitors. So it was a good conversation, but I always, and you always, want to bring it back to these. If these are global companies, why are we only talking about North America? Why are we only talking about the United States? Because what happens, good or bad, in all these other regions really affects their ability to fund, to develop products and understand what other markets are doing to bring features from those markets into the U.S. market or vice versa. So again, pretty interesting. I think that my parts were people were listening intently on because I was not changing subjects, but really reframing how traditionally people look at things. You do that too when you're in panel discussion. So that and then I'm embargoed, but I also went to a Ford Tech event in Dearborn on 2 days ago as well. So I'll talk to you all about that after the embargo is lifted. But and let's just say there wasn't much going on. But anyways,
well, it's good that you're in the auto
heartland
happenings. Heartland. No, there's nothing going on here. So,
but that's why you stay on top of what's going on Chinese social.
I try to, but it's too much happening.
So we know it's the beginning of a new month. So let's just go over May sales real quick.
I mean, we saw numbers tick up for Lead Motor, Li Auto. I think HEMA, the Harmony Mobility Intelligent Alliance, went up a little bit. We'll talk about NIO and BYD. I mean, BYD just had their annual shareholder meeting yesterday. Well, actually today, China time.
Is that broadcast?
No, I think I saw some snippets of it. Wang Chuanfu was tearing up, and because of the recent scrutiny about the price war and about indirectly someone pointing the fingers at BYD for being the kind of the Evergrande, right? We talked about this last episode, but he did say that they have the intent to produce and sell 10 million NEVs a year, which we talked about this on many occasions that was the inevitability of what they're trying to achieve, be the next Toyota. And then he was saying that it's interesting that they're the probably biggest culprit, indeed, in terms of price war. But they somehow framed it as, well, we're the tech, we develop tech, and then we bring the value to the customers in the form of cheaper, more affordable products. And
that's called marketing.
Yeah, they're like, we don't want to play the price war, almost. But I mean, BRD is all alone at the top, as always.
But Lei, that's the that's the playbook, right? Like 不好意思, right? It's not really us.
Yeah.
不好意思 means I'm a little embarrassed, or and so You've heard, I've heard that the Chinese government is not super happy about BYD cutting price a couple of weeks ago, and so this goes.
This past week, the Xinhua News Agency, MIT, People's Daily, CAM, they put out multiple kind of statements out or commentaries out. And they actually had people from BYD quoted saying we want to make this a kind of a fair playing field and not just participate on the price war. So it was kind of odd to see that. But
this is like asking Michael Jordan to be less competitive.
Yeah, basically that is. That's not going to be 100%. Say no more price cuts. It's ongoing as we speak in various ways. I don't think it stops the price war.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Should I be excited or afraid of AI? The answer is yes. It's both.
Things are going to look so different in the next couple years. You will not be ready for the disruptions that are going to come.
I'm Jeff Nielsen, host of Digital Disruption, the go-to podcast for technology leaders.
Our generation's conflict, I think, is going to be emotional, not economic.
The companies that are going to win are the ones that have a couple of characteristics.
Stay ahead of the curve with Digital Disruption. Available now on your favorite podcast platform.
No, it doesn't. And here's the mixed signals that I think Wang Chuanfu and some of these other CEOs hear from the Chinese government, because the Chinese government wants them to dominate foreign markets, but they want them now to start taking a little bit easier on themselves in the domestic market. So,
yeah. And
any surprises on the May numbers, Lei?
No, I mean, NIO was down month on month, but Envo increased. And right, they're shifting their 5566 toward the end of May. So, and speaking of NIO, I mean, it looks like awfully promising based on what was shared at the earnings call, that going forward they expect big volumes. Again, I don't blame Li Bin for putting down the flags, right? He said 50,000 at some point in Q4 a month. At least they didn't say we're going to beat BMW 3 Series, right? When the NIO ET5 came out.
At this point in time, Li Bin is stating that goal for internal reasons as well.
Yeah.
This is not a marketing thing. This is like, we got to get there, guys.
And to me, to take a chapter from the Mission Impossible Final Reckoning, I think this is the final reckoning moment for NIO, because after this, if they don't achieve profitability, if they don't achieve this 50,000 target that Li Bin talked about, I don't know what else they can say again and do again. And that's the final reckoning. I think it's the ultimate.
So, but in the back of our minds, we know it's not a product issue. These products are great. Now, is it pricing? I don't think it's pricing on the Firefly. Do you think it's pricing on the Envo?
It doesn't appear.
You can't pinpoint what is wrong. I can't, anyways.
It doesn't appear that the Firefly will be a significant volume contributor, based on what Li Bin said, because he said half of those 50,000 will be NIO, half will be Envo. And Firefly is only a small portion of that 50 plus thousand. And then in order for them to get to break even, right, he kind of gave the roadmap, right? The 17 to 18% margin, 10% SGA, and 7% R&D in order for them to break even. And looks like they will reach that. They plan to reach that, and they're confident they will. At the same time, we also have Lei Jun saying they expect the Xiaomi EV business to be profitable at the end of the year. He Xiaopeng mentioned a few weeks back that they can achieve profitability. Li Auto is already profitable. So
We're talking accounting wise.
accounting wise, yeah. And yeah, so that this is it. I mean, just roll up your sleeves and there's only 6 months, 7 months left in the year, and we'll be watching closely. And
what we're seeing also, Lei, is from Ali Ben, is that now that he has, and I think BYD to a lesser extent, now that they have multiple brands in the portfolio, if they only have one RMB to invest in, where does it go? How is it divided? Because if Firefly is not driving volume, why is it there? I know it was originally an export brand, but he launched it in China. And if it's a sub $25,000 car, it needs to drive volume.
well,
And so,
he's said on record before that in terms of profitability, the Neo and the Envo are probably going to be the drivers, not the Firefly. Firefly
Right.
could afford to play a little bit more volume, but it's also a product that I think I probably have said this before, that it might not be the fittest products for the Chinese market just because of the competition. But in outside of China, there's ample opportunity for that segment of the market. But it looks
a
like
case in point, Lei.
Yeah.
A quick case in point. Yesterday at the Forvia headquarters, Caresoft had a shark, BYD shark, and a seagull. And I think a lot of people, I think there was about 90 people or 80 people at the small little event. A bunch of them had never seen a BYD. They got inside. They're all surprised. All of them were surprised of the quality. And I didn't speak to everyone. I only spoke to a handful of people while I was standing out there, because obviously you and I are able to drive those things whenever we go to China. But I heard, oh, I'd buy this thing. Oh, I'd buy this thing. Like, they were really impressed and surprised. And I couldn't help but to show pictures of the Han L, because I have them on my phone. And I said, guys, this is a $45,000 car in China. And jaws dropped. I said, this goes 0 to 60 in 2.7 seconds. It has mega charging capabilities, rear seat massaging, and again, $45,000. And they were like incredulous. Well, people need to see it to believe it, which is, it seems like they should just trust us, Lei, but they don't, which is fine. When they start to see it and touch it and feel it and understand that there's no quality gap, there's no design gap, and I think that most people saw the Seagull and saw a ton of value because it's a $10,000 car in China. And one of Terry Wachowski's slides was he put the Seagull up there and said, this is how much it cost in China. And then he put a golf cart, one of those Cub Cadet golf carts, next to it. And he said, this is $12,000 in the United States, a golf cart. So,
yeah, remember last episode I slipped and talked about $10,000 and $20,000.
Yeah.
Available in the US.
I had to put that as a social media post. So,
yeah, we're all wishing, right?
So let me ask you this, like, throw you a curveball, move on to something different. With the current BFF spat between Trump and Elon, do you think that it's just going to be limited to Tesla, or does Trump get more severe with the U.S.? I don't know what else he could do to sabotage the U.S. EV sector, but do you think this is going to create broader implications because they're not getting along in the United States?
Well, I don't think. I mean, first of all, Elon he already was on the record about part of the bill was the mandate, right? Not the mandate, but the 7,500 credit that's being cut, right? He said on the record many years ago that, and multiple times, that he didn't care. So
He's lying,
well,
but
yeah, but I don't think that changes. I mean, that's the way it's going to go. I don't think Trump will reconsider.
Tesla's share price during the social media war tanked. It fell off a cliff. I think Elon lost about 20 billion of personal wealth on paper anyways.
152 billion in market cap.
Taken
But
off.
went back up a little bit today. So, and remember, 7 months ago, we had our episode right after the election that week. You can check. We said, how long did the bromance last? I think you said the two guys with the big egos, it wasn't going to be long. And here we are, 7 months.
6 months.
6 months, 7 months after November, right?
Yeah.
Almost exactly to the day, November 5th to June 5th, right? And I think it's only a small snippet of the soap opera being played out. Who knows what's going to happen, right?
Well, so Elon spent $300 million getting Republicans elected, 250 of that going to Trump. He tweeted, for those that aren't on X or Truth Social, he tweeted that without the 250, Trump wouldn't have gotten elected. Then Trump was like, I asked Elon if he wanted makeup for that black eye. He said no. And I don't want to get into the details too much, but Trump did threaten to cut government spending on Elon's companies, not just so Starlink, SpaceX being the highest profile. And obviously with the cuts to the $7,500 and the charging infrastructure, that affects the Tesla supercharging stations, and it affects Tesla sales in the United States. And with the board, with investors already upset at Elon for being part of Doge and creating a lot of enemies, not enemies, let's just say a lot of people that don't like him in Europe and the UK, you're seeing resulting sales decreases in those regions and those countries, unfortunately. So we're tracking Tesla to probably a huge year-over-year sales shrinking. And this makes June 12th, Lay, such an important event for Tesla.
Yeah, there was that meme of that exit, right? Did you see that? Elon going exit toward the spat with Trump, and then on the highway, the straightway was robotaxi. And he went off. But who knows? I mean, they could amend something that could very well happen, because both of them, they change, right? They're one day they say something, the next day something is different. They could change right any moment. So,
well, especially now that Trump has had a conversation with Xi Jinping, does that change? One thing that we should mention, and maybe you can start the conversation, Lay, is the China had created restrictions on some rare earths. You want to talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so that ended up, this was also reported earlier this week, that in order to get by this restriction, companies are thinking of actually producing the entire assembly and then import it back to the US, because the assembly is not restricted, to my understanding. Is that correct? Only I think that was reported by Wall Street Journal. That was interesting. So I mean, these loopholes and that just
always want to remind folks that in the United States or North America, specifically union plants, if they're shut down, you're still paying workers' salary, generally speaking, okay? So if the factory's not building cars, it's not generating revenue, and the expenses largely are still there. You still got to pay for the factory. UAW workers are still getting paid. So in times of drastic supply challenges, supply shortages, each of the OEMs and each of the tier ones will create war rooms. They'll call them war rooms, where minute by minute they're asking for a bill of lading to track shipments to make sure. I was a logistics liaison for the Fairfax assembly plant, Oklahoma City assembly plant for General Motors, one of my first jobs. And I remember shipping engines from Tonawanda, New York via plane in order to make first shift the next morning in Kansas City, because normally they would ship them via rail, but the rail cars were delayed. And so in order to not idle the factory, we chartered a plane to ship a couple dozen engines. And remember, engines are big and heavy, so not cheap, but it's cheaper than idling a factory for 2 or 3 or 4 hours. So these are the types of extremes that the companies and the OEMs and the tier ones will take. To your point about shipping back and forth, that's super expensive, but it's the alternative is shutting the factory down. So
Yeah.
And we should explain. So there's minerals, which are lithium, cobalt, and nickel. And lithium, China has deposits, United States has deposits. A lot of them are mines and deposits are in Australia and Chile. Unfortunately, for the United States, 60% or 70% of refining capacity is in China. But those are minerals. And then there's rare earths. Well, can you pronounce half of
No.
them?
Okay.
There's seven in particular. Okay. But it's not just the rare earths that China's restricting.
My
It's
daughter probably
the
can.
magnets. Yeah. Well, she's probably studying chemistry and the periodic table. But
Exactly.
But they're also restricting magnets, and not normal magnets. We're talking magnets the size of a chiclet, and they go on e-motors and they go on consumer products. So it's not just the automotive, although the automotive eats up the lion's share of the supply. These magnets use 2 or 3 of the 7 rare earths, and they need those rare earths because these motors get really, really hot, and they'll lose their magnetism when they get really, really hot. If you're using a normal magnet, these rare earths allow it to stay magnetized during extreme heat. And obviously electric motors, rockets, engines, control units get super hot. So one thing that's for sure, Lei, is that Americans, they didn't know. Now they do, how important China is to the global supply chain for almost everything. So, we talked about Elon a little bit. We talked about the rare earth. We talked about mail sales. Anything else that you wanted to talk about?
No. The only thing was so there's 2 Model 7s that are fighting for attention, the Xiaomi U7 and the XPeng G7 starting to tease, and they announced this AR HUD collab with Huawei. They're trying to just change what perception about HUD is all about. And then the G7 itself, I think it's going to slot between the G6 and the G9, which have been upgraded recently. The G7, if you look at the pricing of the G6, it's roughly 100, between 180 to 200,000 RMB. And the G9 is 250 to 280,000 RMB. So we have that gap there, which the G7 will most likely priced. And it's going to probably price below what the U7 is going to be priced. So
the U7's starting at $33,000.
Well, 200. Well, I'm guessing 230,000 RMB, maybe. But I think the G7 will start at below 200,000 RMB. At the top of the G6, which is right under 200,000 RMB. And then get up towards 250, 260. That's probably going to be the price band. And that's going to try to undercut U7. But obviously they're different animals. But again, the significance is the power of Huawei. Now we're seeing Huawei everywhere. Not only in the HEMAs, not only in the Huawei Insides, not only in Audis, but starting to appear on the smart EV startups. At least on the component basis, on the feature tech.
Remember, Xpeng and Huawei, they didn't get along for a little bit there. So this is a really big turn of events. And then you think about the Xpeng Volkswagen partnership. If they're using Huawei HUD, is Volkswagen going to use the Huawei HUD for their vehicles? You know, it's not anyone's guess. Yeah, so that's got to be on the table, correct? So, and I will say this: the Apples and the Androids, they're also likely trying to push into head-up displays because this is really their wheelhouse.
Speaking of head-up display, actually, this is my personal as a consumer. I put a consumer hat on. I've never liked any of the HUDs, even the Xpeng ones that they put out, because I don't like too much info appearing on the screen at all. Even, you know, when you make a turn on the Tesla, that now almost all the smart EVs in China have, is when you make a turn, this image appears on
the video,
right? The video showing the side of the vehicle. I've never liked that. It just, for some reason, that's a distraction to me. So, so
you know, I have an Ioniq 5 and I have a Limited. So I do have the HUD, but when I put the turn signal on, the video shows up on the IP, not the HUD.
Right,
so the HUD is actually pretty simple. The HUD is pretty simple. The video, which is weird, it actually points down, and I feel it doesn't really help me see my blind spot, but anyways.
Well, now the HUDs in China, they have the videos showing up on the HUDs, not on the center screen.
Right.
We'll see about that, and it's probably going to be one of multiple features that Xpeng will tease up until the reveal later this month for the G7.
Well, here's a simple thing that they could do. They could get feedback and then in an OTA create a way to turn it off if they wanted to.
Sure. I mean, that's got to, be there.
And so I from the pictures, the Huawei system looks great.
Yeah.
But again, if every time my turn signal's on and a big video shows up right on my windshield, it would seem to be distracting. So
yeah.
Anything else?
No, I think we covered pretty much most of the topics today. Tesla, by the way, in terms of May sales, right at around the 60,000 unit point.
They're down.
Yeah, we don't yet know the breakdown between exports, and we'll have to wait a few days until the CPCA numbers come out. But it's respectable. I think 60,000 overall is still, given the current environment, not too bad.
But it's boosted by zero. It's boosted by 0% financing. Yeah. So
yeah. Other than that, I mean.
So let's get to some comments and questions. Okay. So SPX, again, thank you for being a loyal live stream participant. And I know, man, I've said the check is in the mail. I think I'm going to punt to Lei because I've really not been at my desk for very long. And the actual conversation, because the question, Lei, is when will the hour-long video with other influencers in China market be released? It's actually a 2-hour video, and I have created the subtitles for it, but I might have to punt and send it over to Lei so he could read it and proofread it. It shouldn't be that hard because everyone was speaking pretty clear English.
Yeah, frankly, we don't do this on a full-time basis on this podcast, so we're busy with other things, and sometimes it takes a bit of more lead time for these to come out to be published. So,
but basically, I'll just take this responsibility and say SPX, I just suck because I just haven't prioritized it as high as I should have. And it's a great video. I think everyone's going to really enjoy it.
Great topics of and discussions and debates, and then
so let's commit to Lei. Let's commit to part 1 being posted before Wednesday or by Wednesday next week. Okay,
that's a good time frame.
Part 2 will be posted the following Wednesday. Okay, so we'll try to get 45 minutes and then 45 minutes, 50 minutes.
Sounds good.
So, Jeffrey, good to see you. I think you're going back to the United States for a little bit, right? So, another week already. Good morning, good evening, good morning, or good evening to you. SSJJ005. Hello to you two. Let me read this silently in case he like bags us or bashes us or something. When is the interview with Neo people coming up? We'll have to ask them.
Wow.
Personally, if Neo can deliver 50,000 a month, as they said in the earnings call, that will be only in December, not for the 3 months for Q4.
So for Neo, they're actually considering tweaking the Neo Day, because in the past, since 2017, they've done this when they unveil a new model. The lead time is extremely long, right? I think the ET9 or the ET7 was unveiled like, I don't know,
a year and a half.
Yeah, like 1.5 years before actually the product actually launched and delivered on the market. I think this was talked about in a media roundtable. And then they were also talking about this ES9 flagship on the 3rd gen platform. So the 5566 that were recently launched are on this so-called 2.5 platform. And the ES9 is actually their true, even more than the ET9, I think, the flagship. And yeah, I mean, speaking of McLaren, part of the pathway to profitability and to relevance, I think if you look at the Neos, all of their e-business, e meaning electricity related, so batteries, e-motor, power swap, these are things that can be considered standalone businesses. And what does Neo do with them? I think going forward is something interesting to watch.
So, I'll let you answer this, Lei. SSJJ005, Hayo Ego NT. Do you know why Zeekr is dropping their sales this year? Their bestseller, the SUV 7X, is even selling lower than the failing L60.
Well, I don't read these if we talk about on a weekly or on a 1 month basis. I can't conclude anything. I think Zeekr was 18,000 something in May, which is normal. I mean, they still have a target, right? I think they're now combining the Lynk & Co. Sales, which actually include some ICE vehicles. So not sure how they play with the numbers, but Zeekr itself, I mean, not that they're part of the Geely Auto group, Geely Auto, after the consolidation. I just can't read too much into that based on 1 month number.
Yeah, I'm not that concerned, especially this early in the year. I think the 7X is a pretty good car. I actually think it looks great too, because it's the crossover style, but very distinctive. Jeffrey seems to be getting a lot of entertainment out of the Trump Elon spat, because he's like, load up on popcorn, no critical minerals. Well, he's now talking about restrictions to the OEMs in Europe, to the point where what you were talking about, Lei, how they're going to send modules over and do finished, final assembly. And then he also writes, BYD, bring your donuts. It's getting interesting. Magnets.
Okay.
So Diane says, I'm a chemist. Magnets used in MRIs. Yeah, MRI. So magnetic resonance imaging systems. June 17th. I'm not sure what June 17th. Oh, so Jeffrey's going back to the United States on June 17th. And that's it. Let me check the other platforms to see if there are any questions on that. Leave there to be. So I think that's it, man. I think we are good to go. This will be an on time.
All right.
So next Friday, we should still be able to do 9 a.m. And I believe there will be much more to talk about next week. So anyways, everyone.
Yeah, so the robotaxi thing, right? It's happening. Supposedly.
Yeah, the robotaxi thing. And then I don't know if you saw, Lei, that Amazon is training robots to deliver.
Deliver
goods.
Packages.
You know where they're sourcing those robots? They're not sourcing them from an American company. They're sourcing them from Unitree. So Unitree, for those that don't know, is a Chinese robot maker. We know Optimus. We know that there are Apptronic is a Texas-based startup doing robots, but Unitree is one of them. Limex is another doing the robots. They have the dogs and things like that, but they post a lot of stuff. The Unitrees and stuff like that post on Chinese social to show off their products quite frequently. So, anyways, everyone, Lei, have a good weekend. Everyone have a good weekend. Good morning, good afternoon. We will see you all next week at 9 a.m. Eastern on Friday.
That's correct. See you guys.
That brings us to the end of this week's show. Lei and I thank you for tuning in. My name is Tu Lee, and you can find me on Twitter at Sino Auto Insight. That's SinoAutoInsight. You can find Lei on Twitter at LeiXing77. That's LEIXING77. If you wouldn't mind rating and or reviewing us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you grab your podcast from, we'd appreciate that as well. Even better, if you enjoy this show, please tell your friends about it. Please join us again next week as we track down all the latest news on China, EVs, and more.